If your goal is to escape low elo as a jungler as fast as possible, then you clicked on the right video. We'll be breaking down the 10 best jungle champions for climbing out of low elo. Now, the order does matter in this one, so the number one pick will be what we consider the strongest champion. And if you want to learn how to carry bad teammates and finally escape low elo as a jungler, well, you're in luck because we just released the best jungle course on the entire internet, literally. It is 5 whole chapters teaching you everything you need to know to climb ranks fast as a jungler. This took us an insanely long time to make, as it's around 3 hours of content where you'll be walked through step by step how to carry as a jungler from the start of the game to the end. Pair that with our brand new champion clear course that teaches you the fastest way to clear on your champion, and trust me, you'll be climbing through the ranks in no time. The best part, you can try all of this completely risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using skill capped, you'll get your money back, no questions asked. You can unlock all of this through the exclusive discount you can only access through the link below. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. Alright, now starting us off at the number 10 spot on the list is Diana Jungle. Diana has a lot of things that make her a great pick in low elo. For one, she has great clear speed since using her abilities actually grants her attack speed. At the same time, every third auto attack of hers becomes empowered to do an AoE attack. She stays healthy in her clear from her W, which gives her a shield, and this is great for low elo players who can struggle with optimized clears. Secondly, she has a very decent early game in terms of fighting. You see, Diana gets a massive power spike at level 6 with her ultimate. Jungle champions like this, such as Shyvana, typically are much weaker in the early game to compensate, but this is not the case for Diana. Sure, she doesn't have crowd control for ganks before level 6, but her actual dueling is still really good. Thirdly, she gets benefits from being an assassin while still being somewhat tanky. Basically, she's somewhat of a stat check champion. This is the kind of champion that is usually just a big ball of stats that jumps on top of you and beats you with higher numbers. This can be great for lower elo players who typically struggle with landing skill shots. And 4, the enemy low elo players will really struggle with positioning and recognizing Diana's engage ranges. You see, Diana's E ability has an absurd range of 825, and it's point and click, meaning you don't even have to land any skill shots. And although you would have to land your Q to get the reset on her E, you can often completely ignore this, as once you have an item or two, if you see a squishy opponent, you can just press E into alt and burst them down with little to no counterplay. The crazy high range of your E will constantly catch you kills in low elo. Not to mention, in mid to late game fights, if 3 or more enemies are grouped up, well, you can just E into alt on them and it's often enough to single-handedly win that fight. The only reason we don't rank Diana higher on this list is simply that there are other champions who are either more well-rounded or just have a much stronger late game, which is something extremely valuable in low elo due to how games last longer on average. Moving on, we have our 9th pick, Warwick. Warwick has always been seen as a great beginner champion. This is because he has innate healing in his abilities that makes his clear very safe and healthy. At the same time, his W passive will literally mark opponents that are low on health, and a champion being low on health is actually the best signal that a gank is available. So you'll essentially get a notification on where you should be ganking. He also has a fantastic early game and mid game, being able to 1v1 most champions, which helps low elo players as they don't need as much matchup knowledge. If you do play Warwick though, there's 2 mechanics you need to know. First, holding down your Q will attach Warwick to his target. So often if you're chasing someone down who has any kind of escape ability up, even flash, you don't tap Q, you hold Q for the entire duration. This way, if they flash or use their escape, you'll actually follow them. It also has the benefit of putting you behind them, and this is where the second mechanic you need to know comes in. So, your E fear. You typically activate your E before you hold your Q. This way your Q can follow any escapes while putting you behind them. Then, you reactivate your E to fear them back towards your team, timing your ult before your fear expires to chain your crowd control. Basically, just don't be that Warwick that tries to land crazy long-range ults. It's better to run at someone, activate E, use Q to swing through, and then activate the fear into then ulting. The main reason we're not ranking Warwick higher on this list is that he doesn't have good late game scaling, which is important in low elo where games last longer. And he doesn't also have the greatest clear speed compared to other champions on this list, and clear speed is actually one of the best ways to just passively get ahead of everyone in the game. Alright, now the 8th jungler on this list is the Ruined King Viego. Here's the thing about Viego Viego jungle. It's basically been a top tier pick all of Season 14. The reason he's great in low elo though is that he has a fantastic 1v1, meaning you don't have to have as much matchup knowledge. You also have consistent ganking power throughout the game, as your E and W are great early on, while your ult then gives you even greater ganks once you hit level 6. He also has a very fast clear that is surprisingly simple to execute on. The only mechanic you really need to know is the specific way to use your E so it doesn't bounce off the wall and show where you are to the enemy. We actually cover all these spots and how to do this in our Viego clear on our website if you're interested. The true reason Viego is on this list though is that he can always 1v9 carry whether he's ahead or behind. This is due to his passive, where when an enemy dies, they leave a mist wraith you can consume that not only heals him, but then turns him into that champion and resets his ultimate. That being said, that's actually why he's also not ranked higher. This one specific mechanic makes him arguably the hardest champion mechanically on this list. However, if you're someone who likes that mechanical challenge, well, look no further than Viego. Moving on to our 7th pick, a champion a lot of you were probably expecting on this list, Amumu. Amumu is another fantastic beginner jungler, with the difference between him and Warwick being that Amumu is a dedicated tank. Amumu is great for low elo, for one, because he has great clear speed that's simple to execute. For two, his abilities and playstyle are very straightforward and easy. And three, he's always useful in every team composition since he's a tank. If you do play Amumu though, there's only a few mechanics you really need to know. First, instead of trying to land max range Qs, it's often better to just run at someone, get within ult range, ult them to crowd control them, then you can land a guaranteed Q to chain crowd control them after. You can also input buffer your ultimate. This means you ult first and then press flash. This gives the enemy less time to react and again, sets up easy to land Qs to chain CC high priority targets. The only reason Amumu isn't ranked higher is that he doesn't have that 1v9 carry potential that's sometimes needed in lower elo when you get especially bad teammates. However, if you're not interested in being the carry and instead prefer to be a tank, well, Amumu is the perfect champion to get you out of low elo. And just outside of our top 5, we have our 6th pick, Lilia. Lilia is a pretty unique champion that has her own way of carrying out of low elo. She has some of the fastest clear speeds in the game, letting you passively get ahead of opponents, and she gets to build pretty tanky while still doing an insane amount of damage. However, a lot of the damage is done over time, so her playstyle is effectively just running around players spamming your Q, which gives you stacks of movement speed. It then applies her passive, which burns them, and also applies the passive of Liandry's, a core item in her build. Meanwhile, your second core item, Riftmaker, will ramp up your damage for each second in combat with an enemy, giving you Omnivamp to start healing at max strength. And your third item, Rylai's, lets you slow them, so combine that with your Q bonus movement speed, and enemies can't really do much. We haven't even touched on the fact that her ult can massively swing fights if used properly, as it has the potential to put the whole enemy team to sleep. In terms of true carry potential, Lilia is honestly top 3 for low elo. However, the reason we don't rank her higher is that she is mechanically difficult. You'll need good kiting and movement to control her effectively, while also good knowledge of when to use each of her abilities. Also, we've talked about the importance of clear speed quite a bit so far, and most low elo junglers don't realize just how insanely overpowered this skill is. For example, here's a gold Lilia. She gets a strong leash from her bot laners, and yet she will still end her full clear by 326. So yeah, that is not the insane clear speeds we just said that Lilia has. Yet, I want you to compare that to the Lilia clear we teach you on our website. Notice how despite starting with no leash, which usually saves you around 5 seconds in your clear, by the time that we end the clear, it still beats the gold Lilia by 10 whole seconds. That's why we created this new jungle clear course on our website. On average, it's going to save you 10 to 15 seconds in every single one of your clears. For nearly every jungler, this is the difference between being able to gank a lane before the scuttle spawn at 330, often netting you an early first blood kill for 450 gold. Instead of being so slow, you have to just run straight to the scuttle at the end of your clear. It also really adds up over the course of a game. For example, if you only saved 10 seconds each time you cleared your jungle, after 6 clears, you're now an entire minute ahead of the enemy. That's insane. You can check out our new clear course with the discount link below. Alright, now cracking our top 5 is the eternal nightmare, Nocturne. There are so many good things to say about Nocturne jungle. He has a very fast, safe, and healthy clear that's great for newer players. His gameplay is very simple and straightforward, with you essentially just running at opponents and pressing E to fear them. Then once you get your ultimate, it's even easier as you just ult a target, E them, and again, run at them. His ultimate also makes him great at snowballing, since low elo players really struggle with map awareness. So once you get ahead enough to kill enemies with your ult, you'll usually just feast on them for the rest of the game. He also has a surprisingly strong early game with his lethal tempo rune, the fear on his E, and the attack damage boost he gets from his Q. This means you don't have to learn too many matchups and can be confident you'll win most 1v1s throughout the game. The only reason we don't rank Nocturne higher is that he does fall off pretty hard in the late game, What that means is that usually if you don't snowball enough in the early to mid game, you can struggle to carry into the late game as you won't be ahead enough to kill the target you ult, while the enemy team will then focus you down. If that one weakness doesn't matter to you though, the Nocturne is a strong, simple champion for carrying you through low elo. Next, in our 4th spot, we have none other than Briar. So, those of you who have been actively playing in Season 14 and paying attention to the jungle meta, well, you were probably expecting Briar higher up on this list. This is because Briar has been arguably the most overpowered jungler all of Season 14. She dominates nearly every 1v1 due to her combination of damage and healing. She has fantastic clear both in terms of speed, but also staying healthy from her healing. And her playstyle can be pretty straightforward and easy to play. Her Q is a point and click stun, and often nothing but your Q and W is enough to kill opponents. Her ultimate can also be incredibly powerful when you land it, since you'll damage and fear all surrounding enemies, often letting you just 100-0 the target while the rest of the team is crowd controlled. Not to mention, her constant damage and healing means she can really carry teamfights all by herself. So now you're probably wondering, well, why isn't she ranked higher? To be honest, Briar is just weird in that she's both mechanically difficult, but at the same time can also be mechanically simple. Because her W auto targets for you, that can make her easy to play. However, it also means you need to know how to use her E really well, to know how to cancel her W early with it and let you regain control. She can also be somewhat squishy, meaning you also need to be good at using her E at the right time for the damage reduction and heal. And basically, long story short, she's very polarizing. Some players will pick up Briar and it comes naturally, others pick Briar up and are completely lost. We also can't lie, given how overpowered Briar has been all season, and with Riot constantly trying to nerf her unsuccessfully, we're a bit worried she'll finally be hit with an actual significant nerf. It's for all these reasons we feel number 4 is a good spot to put her on this list. Alright, now we're into the big top 3, and rolling into that 3rd spot is none other than Rammus. Here's the thing about Rammus, he's actually been borderline, secretly hidden overpowered all of Season 14. Like, his win rates across all ranks have been consistently absurdly high. However, he's just never been that popular of a champion to push his pick rate up enough for most people to actually take notice of this. But there are so many good things to say about Rammus as a low elo pick. First, he gets so insanely tanky that he's super forgiving to play as it's hard to actually get caught out and die. And yet, despite being a tank, he actually does a ton of damage both from his base damages on his abilities, but also from his passive and W. His passive will give his auto attacks damage actually scaling based on the armor he builds. His W then increases this, while then also applying this damage to enemies whenever they auto attack him. It goes without saying, this makes him an insanely hard counter against any heavy attack damage team compositions you face. But it doesn't stop there though. The insane movement speed he gets from his Q lets him easily make picks on low elo players who struggle with map awareness and positioning, and this is even further amplified once he unlocks his ultimate, making it harder for players not to get caught out by him, on top of giving him a great way to swing teamfights. The only reason we don't rank him higher in this list is that he doesn't have that true late game 1v9 carry potential that is sometimes needed in low elo when you get those bad teammates. However, if you enjoy playing tanks, there's really no better jungler to pick up right now than Rammus for getting you out of low elo. Now, for our 2nd place, we have the bane of every low elo player's existence, Evelynn. It's probably no surprise as to why Evelynn made it so high up on this list. Once she hits level 6, she gains permanent invisibility. This is so insanely overpowered against low elo players who already struggle enough with map awareness when they can actually see enemies. At the same time, Evelynn is an assassin with a tremendous amount of burst damage who is designed to be incredibly snowbally. So once you get a few kills and start going, well, you'll start to completely dominate and take over the game. And this is especially true in Season 14 due to the new AP items. Specifically, Lichbane is so strong on her since her E will activate it. It's not uncommon to be able to one-shot targets with nothing but Evelynn E and the Lichbane proc. This means, in teamfights, she of course has her ult to delete an enemy into getting out to safety. But she's not then useless, she can actually go back invisible, which then turns her E into a gap closer again and resets the cooldown, and so she can now then E another target to one-shot them with another Lichbane proc, to then, you guessed it, running away to go invisible into then one-shotting another target. Out of all the junglers in Season 14, Evelynn arguably got the biggest buff due to the item changes. She's effectively been considered overpowered since Season 14 started. The only reason we don't place her number 1 on this list is that she does have one glaring weakness, her early game. Nearly all the champions on this list can 1v1 her before level 6, meaning you need to know how to play around these bad matchups and avoid falling behind early. To be honest though, most low elo junglers don't know how to do this, and so will just give you free scaling. Speaking of which, that's something not a lot of players fully appreciate, just how strong Evelynn is in the late game. Most assassins snowball into big mid-game spikes and then start to fall off. But the combination of Evelynn's stealth, the damage scaling on her abilities, and the consistent DPS of her Q and Lichbane procs, it all means she's one of the strongest late late game junglers in the game as well. Something that of course is extremely valuable in low elo where games tend to go longer. Now, before we get into our number one jungler for low elo, let's go over a few honorable mentions. Shaco, despite being incredibly powerful against low elo players, didn't make the list because he simply requires too much skill to pilot effectively. Bel'Veth is also similar. She's been considered one of the strongest junglers in high elo, but her win rate has never been that impressive in lower elo due to the skill requirements to pilot her. Xin Zhao, despite usually being a recommendation for beginners, didn't make this list simply because of how hard he falls off late game and his lack of 1v9 carry potential. Kayn, despite actually being a great low elo pick, didn't make the list simply because he got nerfed extremely hard prior to making this list, with no signs of Riot looking to buff him back to his old strength. Kha'Zix is another assassin that's usually a great pick to dominate low elo, but didn't make the cut, as he's simply a bit too weak in the meta at the moment compared to other comparable champions on this list. We should also mention Rengar. For many assassins like Rengar who are extremely powerful in low elo, are simply too difficult to pilot effectively for us to recommend low elo players to actually play him. If you don't believe me, just as an example, he has an impressive 52.62% win rate in Masters Plus, but that actually plummets to one of the worst junglers in the game with a 46.64% win rate in Silver. Volibear was also extremely close to making this list, but Riot has been way too volatile with his balancing, where he's been jumping from an overpowered pick to an average pick week to week. We are also very tempted to put Skarner on this list after his rework, but just like Volibear, Riot has been very volatile with his balancing, where he's jumping from one of the literal worst junglers on the patch to being overpowered the next week. The exact same for Rek'Sai, who after her mini rework has been all over the place in terms of her strength due to Riot constantly balancing and hotfixing patch to patch. And lastly is Shyvana, who actually made her number one pick last season, but has been truly struggling all season ever since the season 14 item changes. We should also mention there are a few champions that just barely didn't make the cut, such as Vi, Jax, Brand, Jarvan, Zac, Fiddlesticks, and Udyr, just to name a few. So just because a champion didn't make our top 10 list doesn't mean we consider them to be bad in low elo. Instead, it's usually one of the champions on this list that outclass them for one reason or another. Okay, and finally we have our number one jungler for low elo, the Wuju Bladesman, Master Yi. Now, to be honest, Master Yi has always been that champion people thought was overpowered in low elo due to his 1v9 carry potential, but he really wasn't, simply due to how weak his early game was. However, that is truly not the case anymore in the new season. Master Yi is legitimately one of the strongest early game champions right now and requires incredibly little mechanical skill to win those fights. Your Q does insane damage early while literally making you unable to be damaged. Your E then just empowers your auto attacks, while your passive makes your fourth auto attack hit twice. And if at any point you get into trouble, activate your W for insane damage reduction and heal, which then often buys you the time needed for your Q to come off cooldown to then finish them off. Master Yi has had one of the most consistently high win rates throughout season 14, and yet because he's not popular in Challenger or Pro Play, has been completely flying under the nerf radar of Riot Games. There are several reasons why Master Yi became so powerful in season 14, and it's mostly tied to the item reworks at the start of the season. His first core item, Kraken Slayer, got a massive buff where they actually removed the attack damage scaling, but then gave it insanely high base damages. This means Master Yi is now a monster right from one item completion. His second core item, Rageblade, just got an overall stat efficiency buff, being cheaper while giving more stats. Then his typical remaining 3 items all got significantly more powerful. Wit's End specifically got a change that's a really big deal for Master Yi, where it gives more attack speed and magic resistance while also giving him 20% tenacity. This tenacity is extremely useful for Master Yi since it reduces crowd control duration, as crowd control has traditionally been the best method to shut him down. And speaking of which, another core item of his is Sterak's Gauge, which also got, you guessed it, 20% tenacity added to it. So yeah, you can start to see why he's so strong in season 14. And finally, we have Titanic Hydra, another item of his that got like insanely buffed stat-wise. It's actually crazy when you look at it. However, very few champions can actually fit Titanic Hydra into their builds. So Master Yi is one of the only champions that can actually make use of these insane buffs. So if you're someone who's been playing League for a while, but hasn't played Master Yi this season, honestly try him out, and I promise you'll immediately understand everything that I'm talking about. It's actually crazy how much more powerful he is now compared to past seasons. And we haven't even talked about the fact that he is arguably the best late game scaling of any jungler, which is of course amazing in low elo, where games go the longest. On top of the fact that he's quite literally designed as a 1v9 carry champion, which is again perfect for carrying those really bad teammates. Basically, if you've never played Master Yi or haven't played him in a while, just give him a shot and I promise you won't be disappointed. And speaking of not being disappointed, if you truly want to learn how to carry bad teammates and finally escape low elo as a jungler, well, we just released the best jungle course on the entire internet, literally. It's 5 whole chapters teaching you everything you'll ever need to know to climb ranks fast as a jungler. This is the biggest course we've ever created. It's around 3 hours of content content where you'll be walked through step by step how to carry as a jungler from the start of the game to the end. Pair that with our new champion clear course that teaches you the fastest way to clear on your champion, and trust me, you're going to be climbing through the ranks in no time. Best part of all of this, you can try it risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using skill capped, you get your money back, no questions asked. You can unlock all of this through the exclusive discount you can only access through the link below. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. Alright, and that will do it for this one. We here at Skill Capped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.